Hi and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. For our free tutorial today, I'd like to share with you a jewel-faced pendant. Now, if you have any incredibly large flat discs that you wish to wrap, it could be a coin, it could be something that you don't wish to drill. I have got a 2-inch disc of Jade here to work with today. Relatively slim line, but completely flat, so two flat faces there. And we're going to be working on a variation of a prong setting on the one side, and then we're going to work on a Viking Star design on the other side. So let's head down to the board, we'll take a closer look at these designs and then we'll make one together. So there are a couple of different bail options up at the top I'm showing you there, but the main reason for today's video is the two variations on the face of that flat cabochon, I suppose. Disc would be a better word. It is completely flat, there's no doming. It does have softly chamfered edges though. So it's a very large disc to be working with, and this is in lovely natural jade. It's approximately 2 inches or about 50 millimeters across, so it's rather a large one. And its flat nature lends it to having a flat variation of the prong setting. So there's no curvature on those prongs, they're completely flat, and it's sewn in on the opposite side with this Viking Star design. So why have I called it Viking Star? Well, it's got 5 points and it kind of looks a little bit like a star. I'm using artistic license. So let's just pop those down at the top for now. We're going to take a look at the disc itself, and in order to help us, we're going to need a very technical piece of material. It's a bit of string. So I often wing it when it comes to making cab wraps, but today we're going to wrap a piece of string around our cabochon. It doesn't have to be exactly the same size, as long as you get an idea of how much you'll need. And the reason for that is it's very easy to under or overestimate how long the piece of wire is to create the prongs. So we're going to do the prong side first. And for a piece of this size, you're going to be looking at least 24 inches of 1mm or 18 gauge wire. Probably 26 to 30 inches if you want to do a fancy bail, but around 24 to 26 for an ultra simplistic bail. I would say definitely err on the side of caution and use as much wire as you can possibly manage. So what we will do is we'll start dead in the centre and we'll work in both directions. I'm going to be using my flat pliers. They're the same distance across the prong of the pliers at the box joint as they are at the tip. However, I'm going to show you a little trick that you can use almost any box jointed pliers to use. So what we're going to do is actually put that wire inside the box joint. Let me turn that up for you. Not dead where the thing kind of hinges together, but just outside that area so the wire doesn't get pinched, but definitely inside the box itself. And what that will enable us to do is to create a series of shapes which will all be a uniform distance apart and a uniform length. So let's put the next side in. I'm going to push the wire up first of all towards the camera where it naturally enough gave it a bit of a kiss. So you can see we've got my classic prong setting cheaty technique. If you haven't seen my prong setting videos before, I'll pop a little video up here for you now so you can watch them all. And what we're going to do is to grip across that wire now and draw it back down. So we're looking to make a prong. Now it's a little bit chubby at the moment because of the thickness of the pliers I'm working with. However, what we can do is pinch very firmly and just tighten that end up. Very, very softly nibbling that until it's closed. Now you can give that a really hearty squish to make it completely closed up. What can happen when you do that is that the wire will twist around. Either it will flip like this, or you can squish it like so and the wire on the prong will twist. Either way, you can just very, very carefully coerce that back to flat. What we're looking to do is to create a series of prongs just a little bit shorter than our piece of string, just a little bit less than the circumference of our chosen disc. So in order to get the next section moving, I'm going to pop those pliers back in the box of my pliers right down there at the box joint. I'm going to push the prong away from me. And if I just remove those pliers, you'll see that we've created the next flat baseline. Now, sometimes one of the things that will happen is that you'll get a slightly undulating baseline. Can you see that this section of wire is just slightly further in this direction than this one? So you can fix that just by very, very gently coercing the wire upwards, and very, very quickly you'll be able to see that we have addressed that situation and flattened it down neatly. So if I give that a quick squish to make it nice and flat, I'll show you the next prong. Pop those plier joint back in position. I just hold that upright towards the camera. Push the wire around the outside. It's slightly blurry because the focal zone is just a little bit more southerly. If I remove those pliers, you'll see that we have a regulation distance and a regulation height on those prongs. So I'll do one more in this direction. Let's turn the wire away with the best aspect of the camera available to it. Support your prong. Push that wire back down. Give that a tiny squish first and then close that prong up. And you'll see that yes, it has twisted, but don't worry, you can very quickly flatten that back down. In order to stop it twisting, there are two techniques you can employ. One is to slow down. Be just a little bit more mindful with your making and you'll get a much neater prong. The other technique is to use a second set of pliers across the prong whilst you close that end section up, and in that way you'll get a much neater result. So if I just turn this end up so that it becomes that flat straight line again, and you can check that on a straight line on your board, or you can use a ruler. Flip your design over and continue making prongs in the opposite direction. Let's make one more together. Hold on to that upright section of the prong, push that or pull that down, whichever works best for you. If I give that a little bit of a squish, I'll show you how you can use that second set of pliers all the way through the process. So I'm gripping across the base of that prong and I'm going to very, very steadily just close that up until it's nice and neat. Now, as you move through the process, you're going to continually flip from one side to the other to keep your set of prongs centralised. So you have an equal distance on either end of your wire, and you're looking to create enough prongs to fill just less than the distance of the circumference all the way around your disc. So let's just turn one more up. Hold that in position, and you can push the prong away from you if that helps, if that's easier for you to grip. And then each time before you move on to the next prong, just make sure that you're happy, make sure that those prongs are nice and straight, that they're closed up to how you want them to be closed. They can be just a little bit softer if you want, but the idea is that all of your prongs are the same length and there's a similar distance between each of them. And they should all be perpendicular to that baseline. So just take your time, slow down, and you'll get yourself a lovely straight line of these prongs, just a little bit shorter than your bit of string. So I have my length of wire. I think mine was about 26 inches in length in the end, which will leave us with lots of prospects for different or fancy bails on the end. But I've got a couple of samples on the board which show you very simplistic bails. So you've got choices. And I've set all of my prongs so that these are the same distance apart, the baseline is nice and straight, and each of the prongs is approximately the same length. There might be a tiny bit of variation. The slower you go, the neater it will be. So let's move on to the next part of today's tutorial. So you can see my strip of prongs are slightly shorter than the piece of string, but it's actually easier to fill a gap with a coil than it is to have too many prongs just up at the top centre. So if I show you just here, there's a little bit of a wider gap on this one. And if I flip that over, they were too close together, so I put an oversized coil on the surface. So you've always got choices of how you want that to work for you, but I would say leave a bit of a gap rather than overfill. So what we're going to do is to create a circular form with this baseline, but with all the prongs facing inwards. I quite often teach it in the opposite direction. And I'm going to show you just the beginning of this process. I'm going to be using my bent chain nose pliers at this stage because they give me greater control and because it allows me to show you the best aspect of the technique. So I'm going to start at one end and I'm going to start very, very gently, just creating a bit of curvature in the straight, flat baseline of my design. And what often happens is that you create too tight a curve, and that's actually preferable to creating too loose a curve because you can very gently open it up. So let's just control those wires so they don't hit the microphone again, and just continue to bring those all the way around. And what you're looking to have is a circular form with those two end wires crossing over. So just take your time to make sure that you get a nice round form that fits just larger than your disc. Now, if you need to add in an extra prong, it's very easy to do so. You would go back to your original pliers, pop your box joint in on one side, and continue doing that prong exactly as if it was still a straight line. Sometimes you can't tell how many prongs you need exactly, and it's better to start off with too few and to be able to add one. As it stands, I'm quite happy with the overall shape and size and number of prongs on this piece, so I'm going to give it a bit of a gentle hammering now. Before I do so, I will just ensure that that's as round as I can make it. It looks pretty good to me, certainly enough for our demonstration today. So I'm going to show you how to hammer this to add a little bit of strength. What we need to do is not put any pressure where wires cross over. And in fact, it's very, very gentle hammering. So we're just looking to get some residual strength. So what I might do is start on the south side, the 6 o'clock position, say from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, all the way around with my chasing hammer on my mini block. And then we're going to go very, very carefully just up the other side. So I'm just going to prise the form open slightly. And again on the other side, just to ensure I'm not damaging any of the wires by pressing them down too hard on top of one another. Now, I haven't absolutely smashed it senseless, but what I hope to have done is just given it a little bit more residual strength. So let's try that over the surface of our disc. That all looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to decide now to just put a little upright at the centre there. So I do need to address if there are any wonky prongs, like that last one there, not quite sitting right. Let's just fix that. That's a little bit better. I'm a little bit happier with that now. You may need to open some out, you may need to close some up. Let's put a tiny bit of a curve on the end, just so that this all meets in the middle. Now, you can go for a very simplistic bail. One of these is simply a double simple loop, just for demonstration purposes, and the other one was a very simple single wrapped loop. So you can go for something as simplistic as that if you like. I'm just going to turn both of these wires up and wire them together in a figure-of-8 weave, just for a couple of weaves, and we won't do the whole bail together because I feel like I've done that a bajillion times. But what I do need to do is make sure that the size is correct. I need to be able to see a little bit of light in between the inner edge of that baseline and the outer edge of that disc. So as long as you've got a little bit of space, the reason for having such a light coloured board is that I can show you what I mean. So I'm going to turn those uprights at the 12 o'clock position. Let's flip that over. And I'm going to try and make those bends the same distance from the last prong on either side, just to allow a little bit of symmetry. So I'm just going to turn the camera off for a second and do a little bit more figure-of-8 weaving. If you need a video on figure-of-8 weaving, I do have one on my channel. Feel free to give that a quick search. So I've taken a few moments to do a 5 and 5 figure-of-8 weave, and I've just completed that up at the top with a low-key bail. If you want to see how to do one of those, I'll pop a little card up so you can check that out for yourself. Let's head down to the board and get on with the next step. So to complete our project today, we're going to add in our last section of wire. I have a length of around about 24 inches of 0.5mm or 24 gauge wire, slightly stronger than I would normally use for a weaving wire, but it's because it forms quite a strong part of the design. Certainly it will help keep your gemstone nice and safe. So I'm going to just grab my frame. And what I'm going to do is to attach with 3 wraps anywhere really on the frame near the top. Now there is a little bit of a gap just here on the neckline opposite where I started that 5 and 5 figure of 8 weave. Ideally, it would be nice to get those 3 wraps up in that section there. It can be quite tricky though, certainly tricky to show you. So if it goes in the gap, it goes in the gap. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Let's just get 3 nice safe wraps on the frame near that 12 o'clock position, and we'll basically work with what we can work with. So if I get a couple of twists going around, and what I'd like to do is make sure that the very last piece of wire where I cut it away sits on the inside of the frame, so that that's much less likely to catch on clothing, hair or skin. So let's just trim that last little tiny tricky bit away, pop it in the melt pot, and then just scooch that wire coil nice and neatly. Hopefully we can get it to sit up into position. Yep, that worked really well. So let's flip it over onto the other face, like so. And what we're going to do is estimate the point on the clock face every 1/5. Now that may not make any sense, but when we get started, it will make sense. So dependent on how big your prongs are, how far apart your prongs sit, it may be a regular number of little spaces. So you can see we've got 1 gap, 2 gap, 3 gap. And what I think I might do is start with 3 and see how it goes. What I'm looking to have is 5 little arc shapes moving around the side or this side of that disc. Now what I need to do is bring the wire up inside the gap like so and allow it to create a loop. So let's draw this wire all the way round, and I'm looking to create a loop as if I'm making a Viking knit. So draw that up and through. So you'll see that the wire crosses around in this direction, comes up inside the frame and then crosses over itself. Now that loop's really important. So I'm going to make sure that I'm happy with the size of that arc that we've just created. Overall, I think that's pretty much 1/5 of the face. So let's move on to the next position. And I'm just going to guess rather than counting, because I think that will help me, because I don't have the correct number of prongs. And I expect that that may not be an easy thing to achieve without too much forwards planning. We know what it's like with me. I tend not to. So let's just hold the thumb on that arc to make sure that we get a lovely arc shape. Pull that down into position. Make sure that you get that loop and then rotate around so that you can see the beginning of the design. So when I come down to the 6 o'clock position, I might make this one slightly smaller, so that I can take it symmetrically across, because I know that will give me the best opportunity of getting something resembling the star that I'm looking for on the rear of the design. So let's find the end of that 0.5mm gauge wire, post it up inside outer frame, pull that all the way around in a lovely arc, making sure that we have that loop, and then creating the next arc on our way. So overall, I'm quite pleased that this is going to look like a 5-pointed, you could call it a Viking star. I'm going to call it a Viking star. I don't know what it actually is. I'm making it up as I go along. So let's bring the end of the wire back up inside that frame, making sure that we create a nice little loop. If your wire twists, just help it so that it twists the way that you want it to. And then we'll bring that back up to the top for the beginning of the second layer. Now, where we have this little crossover point at the top, that's actually going to help us quite nicely. So what I'm going to do is to loop my wire all the way around the outside of the neck. Let's bring that up into the light. And just pop that up right in the very middle of everything. And hopefully making sure that that goes across the front of the design, Just going to draw that through nice and easily. What's going to happen is that will sit down neatly at that neckline position, which is where we want it to sit. What I'm going to do here now is create a second loop of wire just around that crossover point. So if I bring the wire back through underneath both of those crossover points, let's just control that wire. Let's hit the microphone. Let's hit the camera. Let's get everybody involved. And what I'm doing is I'm controlling a loop around that nexus point up at the top. You might need to just help that into position so that it doesn't tighten too early. And then I'm going to draw this around in a secondary arc shape, like so. And what we need to do with the secondary arc is bring the end of the wire inside the first loop that we created. So you can see we made a little loop hanging off the frame. Draw the wire through that loop. Again, controlling the wire so you don't get any nasty kinks. And what you'll end up with is a little double arc shape. Draw that all the way around and you get this kind of Viking knit impression. It's not the same as a Viking knit, but it just makes me think of it, which is why I've given it the name. So again, we're going to bring that tail of wire through the loop that we created, back on itself, back in the same direction that the wire is travelling from. So we've come across through the loop back towards my left hand, loop around, create another lovely swooshing arc. Let's give that a quick smooth. It's getting a little bit tense. Quick smooth through. Draw the tip of the wire through the loop you created on the first row. There's Joey again, more helicopters. What can I say? Draw that all the way round, making sure that your little swooshes, your little arcs are of similar dimension. And then we're going to rotate this around, following on with that swooshing loop, and you get this second row, as it were. So we've only got one more to do. Let's pop the end of the wire, getting a little bit tense, bit like Joey Dog, through that loop. Guide that into position, controlling any nastiness in the wire before it happens. Get that to sit how you want it to. You can always use the back of your thumbnail just to elegantly arc or swoop that wire. And then we're on to our last little arc just here. Now, for this to be nice and secure, I want this to come back to the frame. Looking at it, I think the best place to finish off would be just here. But if it looks better for you on the other side, then just pop it on there and finish off with 3 little wraps. What I might do actually is just send it through there once and then across the back. That might look really lovely. Just adding another layer to that knit effect. So that's signed off on that last arc. I'm going to bring it around like so and give it 3 little wraps on the far side, just because I think it balances it more nicely. So we do have a little bit of wire left over. Push that circular form, or that coil rather, around the frame. Second time, and then what we might do just to make life easier is trim away to about 1/2 inch. Just to get that last pass of wire through. And then when it sits inside the frame, we're going to give that a trim, making sure we cut only the wire we're looking to cut. Get that end tucked away neatly. And then we will have a look at our designs. So you've got that prong setting on the front. And then you've got the variation of the Viking Star setting on the back. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed the Viking Star and Prong setting jewel-faced pendant design with me today. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to leave a subscription and a like, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye for now.